Welcome to the Grown Up Table, where we have conversations about life and character. My name is Grant Swartzwelder, and I'll be your host on this journey today. The topic today is: are college students dumb, lazy, or coddled? Or all three? Consider the following: you have grade inflation, you have students that are averse to risk, you have technology dependent, you have parents that seem to be either helicopters or bulldozers. You have poor study habits and poor performance. What does this all result in? It results in lower expectation, lower production, lower analytical thought, and a potential issue in the workforce. To address all of this, I'm very fortunate to have Blair Pomeroy as my guest. Known him quite some time. He has fantastic experience. He's been an executive in the airline industry, a consultant, and now a professor at a prestigious university. Through all of this, he's been able to mentor and talk and teach to thousands of students. So he has direct experience with this type of situation. And so with that, Blair, I'd welcome you to the grown-up table. So let me just throw a big softball at you. Are students lazy, dumb, or coddled?
Uh, well, thank you, Grant. Nice to be here. I put together some thoughts. I hope you don't mind if I share a few slides.
Yeah, please.
I'll try to keep it. I worked in the consulting business, Accenture when they had strategic services, Oliver Wyman airline, and for about 20 years, I was working with dozens of new college grads every year. Uh, and now at the University of Pittsburgh in the business school, I work with hundreds every year, and this is my seventh year. It's my retired job. It's a lot of work. So I've had at least 2,000 students, right? So I have a pretty good pull.
I
And
would
of course, I
agree.
read about this topic. And so, to your question, are they coddled? Are they lazy? Are they dumb? Um, I think they're wildly coddled, right? That's my little Blair meter. I think they're pretty lazy, more coddled than lazy. Are they dumb? I gave them a current events. I teach mostly business strategy. Yesterday was our first day of class, and I gave them a test on geopolitical and basic business stuff. They're senior business majors that I'm teaching, and they just a lot of them didn't know what the inflation rate was. A lot of them uh, don't know Elon Musk company. They just don't know a lot. We'll tear into that in a minute. Let me add one other dimension here, which is wildly important, is the risk aversion, fear of uncertainty, need for directions. Uh, I think this is pretty high. Um, and if you ask me, Grant, and I hopefully you have, uh, to try to explain this because I've been stewing in my juices. I just I just didn't see it coming because when you're with a global strategy house, normally you screen out most of the coddled, lazy, dumb, and fearful type. And now I'm in a general, I mean, Pitt's a good school, right? But it's a main market school, and I just didn't expect to see students like they are. And so I've been
Really.
thinking and pondering and scratching my head with the little hair that I have left. And I think maybe if you let me, I want to start with this article from the summer, July, in the Atlantic. I think it holds a lot of explanation of how we got here. Uh, in the 1980s, kids were riding bikes. Like half of the kids were riding bikes frequently, and it gave them independence, and they fell. They decided where they were going. They took risks. Sometimes they failed. Sometimes they hurt themselves, bent their bike, uh, but they recovered, right? And they went and found new trails. Today, well, kids don't ride bikes. That's what the article's about, right? Parents are fearful of harm, right? There's traffic, and you can be abducted by the pedophile next door that you don't know, and there's bodily harm. So we have what we talked about as safeism, right?
Right.
Safetyism. And it's also reinforced by the media and by the liability lobbies with the lawyers, but also I should put here, educators love this stuff.
Explain what safetyism is. It's kind of a making sure emotionally they're safe.
Yeah, well, can I answer that in a second?
You
Because
can.
I think it started with physical. We got to keep them safe. There's so much harm, and now it's migrated to emotional safety. Right? We
Okay.
got
We'll
people
save
that
that for
are
later then.
feeling badly about themselves, and we have to anesthetize them from pain.
Fair enough.
So this bike time has been replaced by safer structured activities and gaming and social media, and instead of riding your bike places, the parents will take you. And we know that a lot of them will have to still, even after the 16, they still, with a second case study, their parents will have to drive them because the number of folks getting their license. Well, Grant, I guess when you were 16, if you were like me, the day you turned 16 was the day you learned to drive.
I had an appointment in the driver's test place.
But now we see in the 80s, 41% of 16-year-olds had license, and now it's under 25% and falling. And the Washington Post recently did this little Gen Z biopsy. And if you go to the bottom of what's on the screen, people were saying, this Brianna Schmidt, learning to drive is a major source of anxiety, right?
Right.
So we can see folks, what 23 is the new 13, right? People being children into adulthood because they're enabled by parents and teachers and now the government, right? So I like to think of it. Let me try to unpack a little bit more. Safetyism, right? Maybe it started out even before the 80s with the, don't ever hit your shoulder, no little spanking. And by the way, I think of myself as a political centrist. So this is no right-wing commentary or left-wing commentary, but I do think the progressives of the time convinced us that they knew how to raise children better. But then it moved into walking to school is dangerous and unstructured play is dangerous. You might go into a house that's abandoned and fall through the floor. Never leave your kids alone, right? We're not talking about hot cars in the Texas summer, but never leave your kids home alone for anything. Uh, and unsupervised sports, well, somebody could be treated unfairly. And look, if you have an infant or grandkids, look at all the kit you. And in some states, you have to keep your kid in a special car seat until 12, right? Oh, goodness, that they take any risk. When I was in Little League, after the game, we all were in the back of the pickup truck to get ice cream. But that ain't happening now.
No.
But that and parents tracking you. Well, make sure you tell me where you are so that I make sure you get home safely. Let's move that. And the research shows that it's moved from just physical to emotional kind of pain anesthetization. Uh, right. So let's make people feel good about themselves, participation trophies, and give them trigger warnings if something's going to upset them, and safe spaces in schools, and speech codes so that nobody will say anything that ever hurts your feelings. Constant affirmation when they say fuel is the affirmation of Gen Zs, and your favorite grade inflation, which I see constantly. I mean, the Ivy's average GPA out of 4 in the 60s, 2.6. Now it's 3.6, moving to 3.7, right?
Yep.
We got to make people feel good. You don't really have to do that much, right? Because that also, working hard is painful. And we want you to feel good about yourself. So let's give everyone good grades. So many students here have perfect GPAs. And then we bring in the technology. We talk about technology's harmful effects, but related to kind of bubble wrapping our folks, right? Now they get quick validation when you do a like or are liked. You get quick dopamine hit and acceptance, and you can watch and see only things that you like and agree with, right? So you get an echo chamber. And when somebody does hurt you with microaggression, you now have a way to punish them. Parents, educators, politicians, media, excellent job at convincing our students that they are fragile beings in a dangerous world. And I see my students, they absolutely are so fearful. And I've heard other faculty say that's the thing that's changed most in 20 years is they don't like any uncertainty. They're fearful. They want very, very detailed uh, instructions. Basically, we've told them that they're not capable of taking care of themselves. They believe that, and they don't want to be fully independent. What do you think? Again, I'm going to give you some examples, real life examples that should make you laugh, but also make you cry. What do you
No,
think of this, Grant?
no, I think I'd like to hear your examples from the University of Pittsburgh because I think that is so germane to what this is all about. But, there's several points there that on technology, I don't think that's made them dumb. It's just made them very different. Their attention span is shorter, or different. It's aimed at being able to do 6 apps, but not necessarily being able to focus on a story or do analytical thinking. And so you have that technology issue. Back on your point with the helicopter or the bulldozer type parents, it I think eliminates the risk. Or the willingness to take on that risk because you have someone clearing the path so your challenges are not approached. So it does seem like what you're describing, I don't know if it's necessarily dumb, but it definitely affects their coddled or their condition for current day activity.
Well, I mean, the short attention span goes back to the 70s, right? Or it goes back to Sesame Street where they realized that kids' attention span wanes after 3 seconds. So let's change the scenes every 3 seconds. And so instead of teaching, and TV and other medias and now technology have grabbed that, and before you could get bored, we switch things on. But a lot of life is very, very complex, and you have to study the Gordian knot and think through it and ponder it. But they just can't. They just can't sit with things. And I see if I have a particular boring class, they all get up and go to the bathroom and get water, and I say, sit down. You're not a 5-year-old, but they have so much ADHD in them, and because they've been trained to want constant stimulation. But the real world is not full of constant stimulation.
Yep.
So
And I think they want constant uh, gratification or acceptance. And you look at that from a grade standpoint, that over some of the facts here, over the last 30 years, average college GPAs increased by 0.34 points from 2.81 in 1990 to 3.15 in 2020. That's a 12% increase. You have at Harvard, again, you've had 79% in fall of 2023, 79% were either A's or A minuses. That's up from 60% a decade earlier. And so it's starting to almost be a participation type of effort as opposed to really being a meritocracy.
I remember somebody screamed at me. Uh, I saw somebody after the semester, a real solid student, and let's call her Sarah. I said, Sarah, it was between classes and people were milling about. And I said, congratulations, you did really great. I think you got an A minus. And she spun around and she said, I wanted an A. Oh, who knew? And off she went.
Yep.
So
So give some examples from
yeah, I think
your college.
hopefully you'll like this. This is a couple years back. I could only find this memo from one of the vice chancellors. This is telling the staff that the students kept getting these self-care days, right? And the provost would say, life is so tough. You need to take care of yourself. And on the second one, she actually sent a note saying, now, remember, this is a self-care day. Do not do any work. You know, pamper yourself. I mean, these are 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, and they're basically saying you are so fragile. We've got to give you these special self-care days. And then, of course, the staff also needed self-care days, right? It's just, again, these were just ad hocs. They just came out of nowhere, and like, oh, you guys are all so fragile.
That seems to
This was
also fit
last
within
available.
how folks study because it used to be where you'd expect to spend 2 to 3 hours for every semester hour you take, so that'd be, 25 or so hours, and, recent studies show that it's closer to 13 to 15 hours. So you're down from 2 to 3 hours a semester hour of study down to 1.5, and so, you just can't study, you can't work that hard, so you've gotta be able to calm down and, enjoy and relax,
Yeah,
and
right. And
so
certainly you're not supposed to study on a self-care day, Grant.
no.
You must take care of yourself because life is tough.
And then you wonder if
But
that tr carries on into the workforce because you don't want to have to work as hard, you need time off, you need to be remote. Does it manifest itself going forward? And
well,
that's
just
the
at the
question.
end of my tenure in consulting, and I've actually a friend of mine is very senior at McKinsey, and he's on a West Coast office, and he says they now have a weekly survey on how do you feel, right? Do you feel appreciated, esteemed, etc. So, going back to a few more quick examples. This one,
Please.
they were so happy with this. The business school was so happy that they did this emotional support pierogi hunt, right? And that's the way they named it. And again, they're signaling to students, you need support. You're fragile, and we are going to support you with by hiding 30 crochet pierogies, each carrying an uplifting message with a redeemable small prize. I mean, we're not spending money teaching people with high touch skills. We're throwing these little shiny trinkets their way. And when they introduced this, so many faculty were so happy with this. And I thought, this is just nonsense.
Yeah.
What do you think,
It
Grant?
really
You
kind of
want a crochet
well,
pierogi?
yeah, I would love a little crochet ball. I would give it to my dog, and he would enjoy chewing it all up.
Right.
But I think that speaks to kind of the emotional muscle that is not being generated, and with that is a lack of resilience. And I see this time and time again when you critique someone, they don't use it as constructive or to challenge themselves to get better. They see it as a dissatisfaction of their life, of their position. And the best way to do that is to change that position by either changing classes, changing work, not being able to handle the challenge that exists. I don't know. I look at you and I'm saying, I'm sure your life has been so easy. You haven't had any challenges, but I think most
Yeah, no,
people
no,
have
it's yeah,
had
yeah.
plenty.
But I think what you're talking about is this is it's part of the grievance culture is if you are tough on somebody, you're a hater, right? And you're a hater and you need to be outed and punished because you're hurting people. And this person here wrote on ratemyprofessor.com on me, uh, you know, rubrics is an academic sub, but let's focus on the second paragraph. Criticizes student examples in class. I critique them. I don't put anybody's name on, but some of the best of written assignments and some of the worst I put up on the screen. And again, I don't ever ascribe it to anybody. I just say, what do you guys think of this? How could we have worded this better? And students come in and they cry, you attacked me in class. And no, I say, yeah, we all make mistakes. We all fall short and we have to laugh at ourselves. And, the key is what do we learn? Michael Jordan says, I failed and failed and failed again. And that is why I succeeded. But they don't want to fail because they have never failed and they don't know how to handle the pain of failure. And so they write things like this criticizes student examples of class, which can affect mental health of students.
Mm.
And God forbid I cold call students. I call them out to see if they're prepared and ask the questions. God forbid I do that.
It's such a
And
contrast because
they hate it.
as a professor, your job is to make them stronger and better and wiser. As an employer, my job is to make them a better employee, a better person. But to do that, you have to use your red pen and highlight certain things so that you can grow from that. But if it's not received in that spirit, it's kind of a failure of an opportunity.
But my ratings at the school are very, very high now. But I have to tell them all the time, if I didn't care, I wouldn't spend my weekend writing on these things, writing all over your papers so that you can become better. My career is over. Your career is in the balance. I mean, I have to tell them this stuff. I'm not a hater, I'm a lover, because if not, they can't receive any criticism because they never have, right?
Right.
They've been in bubble wrap. I think I have one more.
Please.
Maybe 10% of them are on these disability things. Most of them are they have attention deficit disorder. And you know, I think my bias is that most of them go to their doctor, they pay to get this, and they get extra time and accommodation in class. They can come and go in class when they want. They don't have to attend. They get extra time on exams. I have dozens of these a year, dozens. And these people are 6 months away from jobs and they still want to be bubble wrapped.
And what do you think should happen instead?
Well, I mean,
Because it
you
sounds
think,
like you think there's another option there.
yeah, I think the option is, well, we all have limitations in this life, right? How do we, I took this long psychometric test and it said I was great on listening comprehension, great on reading comprehension, and I'm absolutely horrible at graphs, reading a graph, which is true.
Wow.
And,
First
but I
world
can't
problem
stop
there.
reading graphs, right? Maybe I could get new strategies for dealing with my limitations versus hiding from them.
Yeah, no, that's very true. But then the contrast to that is if you want to get into graduate school, if you want to achieve certain things, you've got to have high grades. And so if I don't use that extra time, if I don't do some of these things, then I stand a chance to get that A minus or heaven help us a B or a C, and that could have an effect on my interview, my job opportunity, my opportunity to get in grad schools. So how do I balance that when society demands certain grades, then don't you have to play to the system to achieve those grades that opens those doors?
Well, the sad thing here, and I'll swing from kind of a right perspective to a left perspective, is most of the students that have these disability exceptions are wealthy students. I can tell, right? And they're getting unfair advantage. Most of these, you wouldn't know that there was a disability, but they game the system to get an advantage. Do we really want to live in a society where people are always gaming? I don't think so.
Well, so that becomes kind of more of a monetary or economic split that rich get richer in this regard, academically grades opportunity versus those that can't afford the psychological test or don't even know that that is an option.
Yeah, that's right. You're exactly right.
And so when you look at these students, those 10, 20, however many that you have, how do they perform with that extra time relative to others that are within the time frame that they're allotted?
I mean, they do overperform. They do overperform because I give time constrained essay tests, which are very, very hard.
Yes.
And and they have more time. They can structure their work, and they do it in a soundproof booth alone, so they don't have any other distractions in the room. Yeah, some people do need it, Grant, but it's pretty clear most of the 10-15% of my students that have these disability exceptions, I think it's gaming. But
So,
again, the parents are the ones doing this, right? The parents are the ones doing this.
yep. No, well, they have the money, they have the knowledge to do it. So Blair, when you look at all this, do you think all this coddle and lazy and dumb really reflects or affects the student's ability to perform in the real world? I know you've been an executive, a consultant. Uh, how do you think this works in their career?
I I foresee big problems, Grant, actually. I mean, I'm even in a global strategy house like Oliver Wyman. Just as I was retiring, I saw glimpses of what was coming. We had a major uh, CEO presentation at EasyJet in Europe. Sorry, there's some very big construction vehicle outside my window, so I apologize for the background noise. Um, and the CEO moved with the meeting from Friday to Monday, and the person who was doing all the work was based out of San Francisco. We needed to be in London, and she says, "Well, it's my birthday that day, and I always go get a pedicure with my friends. Um, and she just wouldn't do it, right? She was gonna go get the pedicure, and we had to tell the uh, you know, I never worked with her again, but there are more and more of these. Her name was Elaine. There are more and more of these folks. And I've already mentioned it about McKinsey giving people a survey on how you feel. I think what's going to happen though is when we have a situation where we have excess staff, these difficult, pampered, lazy, low value folks are going to be the first out the door. Nobody's going to say in their review that they're pampered because they don't want to be or coddled. They don't want to be sued. But I do think the people who show up prepared, aren't always looking to blame, but use personal failure as a way to learn and get stronger. Those people are going to really stand out. And there used to be heaps of them, and now I don't think there are heaps of them. But you know, employers are going to have to adapt that most of these folks are just going to need to be tended to because you're going to be the adult in the room.
Yeah. It does seem like they might come into the workforce academically credentialed, but practically they might not be prepared for what really exists. When I go and look for employees, kind of how put it all this into my phraseology, is that I'm looking for someone with half a brain, but a whole lot of want to. Half a brain
Yeah.
because most of what we're doing isn't that hard. You can figure it out, but you have to have the want to figure it out, to go research it, to go ask the question, to go think about it analytically. And if you don't have that want to, which comes with perseverance, dedication, all that, then you don't achieve what you really need to achieve.
Yeah, I'm completely with you, Grant. Yeah,
So,
I mean, I'm going to say the same thing, right? When I hire, the family has some other businesses, I look for resilience, resourcefulness, people who don't need paint by numbers, you know, uh, and intellectual curiosity, right? You don't want to be an influencer on TikTok. You want to learn about everything in the world, particularly the job in front of you. Yeah, and that's what I try to instill in my students and my children.
yeah. Now you
I'll
have
do my
a
best, Grant. I sometimes I feel like it's a losing cause, but we'll stay in the fight.
and you I think you had some thoughts on fighting back and a slide on that.
Yeah, I just I think some of this stuff has led to a political counterbalance. The famous financier Walter Wriston says the pendulum always swings till it crushes the opposite wall. And I do feel like there is some pushback on some of this nonsense. Uh, but it's slow and and I see this article was last week in the Wall Street Journal. Goodbye, gentle parenting. Hello, blank around and find out. Right?
Right.
I think people are starting to realize that a lot of these folks that told us they were the experts on how to raise kids, you know, don't ever swat them and do this, and don't say this. These folks kind of made up stuff. They made up science, and I'm not talking about vaccine science. I'm talking about psychological stuff. And I think the clever people are taking control of it themselves, right? They're stopping the overstructuring. They're stopping, they're pushing their kids into risky situations where they'll skin their knees and maybe have a heartbreak, but they're going to come out stronger.
So at the end, are they dumb, lazy, or coddled?
I,
It's a
I,
complex question, isn't
I
it?
think they're actually all of them.
Right.
And again, the fear they're because they've been protected. They have so much fear of uncertainty and failure. That's probably the one that most concerns me, right? They want to be protected from pain, physical pain, and now emotional pain. And we've done that to them.
Yeah. So we've created a triple threat of insecurity and of a workforce.
Yeah.
Well, that's encouraging, Blair.
Yeah,
Blair Pomeroy,
I
I
don't mean to
really
be I
appreciate.
don't mean to be a killjoy. You will never invite me to any future event to go.
No, you're always welcome. This is fantastic. Blair, I certainly appreciate your participation in the grown-up table, and thank you so much. Well, let's clean the table here at the end of this episode. Here's the thing: kids aren't inherently broken, but what we've done is created a system that really mistakes protection for preparation. We've tried to give them everything they need, but in doing so, we've kind of removed a lot of the things that they really do need. The solution isn't to really abandon them, but they think of themselves as glass, as a fragile, and we have to be able to enforce that that is not the case, and they have to fight through that. We can fix it, but that also means doing something very radical, which is what Blair alluded to. We have to expect more of them, force them into situations that are more challenging and have the ability to fail. College students aren't necessarily dumb, lazy, or coddled by choice. It's kind of a logical result of the culture that's been created by society, their parents, the world. And but the good news is that if we change how we approach them, what we expect of them, that can be reversed. So with that, appreciate you joining us at the table, and look forward to you being at the next time.